being Swiss, I try to stick precisely to my 7 minutes. So I'm actually from a landlocked country. I'm a fish biologist by profession, by background, but I always had a passion for fisheries and marine environment. So 15 years ago I founded my own company under the name of Blue U. This is nowadays a group of companies, like 5 different companies in one group, and we are exclusively focusing on sustainable seafood solutions, basically all around the world. I'm happy to present you a new program we've been developing over the past 3 years under the name of Impact Blue. The starting point of Impact Blue is basically the problem Dick Jones has already been outlining in his speech before. As you are all aware, our global fishery sector is not particularly performing very well. So currently we're losing more than $80 billion in terms of economic value due to overexploitation, bad management, illegal fishing, and also particularly bad practices in the post-harvest sector, so spoilage and wastage around seafood supply chains. So basically fisheries have a big problem, and the good news is that stocks can recover, ecosystem can recover, and we can actually do a much better job. So just for the coastal fisheries, the small-scale fishery sector alone, which is the 50% of the catch of roughly 40 million tons, the global upside potential, if these fisheries would be sustainably managed, but also if the catch would be properly taken care of, could actually yield in more than $30 billion of revenues annually, like every year, higher profits, higher revenues for coastal communities, for fishermen and their families, and for the connected local seafood industry. So it's a huge amount of value that is out there as a kind of a carrot if we would manage these fisheries better. And my team could experience this kind of upside value ourselves. We are running a kind of a larger fishery improvement program in the Philippines, working with small-scale fisheries that catch big adult yellowfin tuna for the sashimi market. And in this fishery program over the last 8 years, we could increase the profitability of the primary catch, the income of the fisherman, by 40% just by adding enough ice to the catch and by properly treating the tuna. So basically the same amount of catch, they're not catching more tuna, they're catching better tuna, and they add 40% to their daily income. So if all this sounds nice and good, so we know there's a big problem and there's also a big reward if we could change it. So what is preventing us to actually undertake massive reform and improvement on a global scale? So one key bottleneck is clearly a missing finance. So basically, currently most of these fishery transition and reform programs are exclusively funded by grants. So public grants, World Bank money and so on, and a little bit philanthropic money. But currently the total grant funding is roughly 1 to 2% of the total global need. So we are missing out we have a huge gap in missing finance. And the only sector that can provide finance is the private capital sector, right? So that's the only source we can tap into. But the key problem there is there's nobody out there that is developing pipeline in the sense of de-risking investments into sustainable fisheries and create transition models that will allow private sector capital to flow into fishery transition. So basically that's the key bottleneck why we have founded Impact Blue. So Impact Blue is an organization that is developing investable fishery transition projects for coastal fisheries. So we're acting as a project developer, something like an architect in real estate. So we're designing fishery programs that are investable to allow this huge amount of private sector capital to flow into the transition process. So how does it work? It's basically a step-by-step process. First, our team is developing a project, so we are identifying suitable candidate fisheries. We have our kind of clear selection criteria. We engage with local communities, stakeholders, fisheries, seafood processing sector, and investors. And then we are designing holistic transition plans that not only address the conservation part, but also the social and, most importantly, the economic side of the sustainable fishery. So we're creating business plans and underlying financial models as the first step. This process takes usually 2 years to complete, so it's a long planning thing. Finally, we're doing the due diligence with investors, so all the legal due diligence for all the investable entities that are executing certain interventions in this fishery. We are structuring investments for private capital and then finally execute transaction, which means a fishery and all these different entities that are executing certain interventions receive money for long-term financing of all activities. So that's, after transaction, that's basically where somehow the music really starts playing. That's when a fishery goes into a transition mode of probably 6 to 8, even maybe 10 years. What Impact Blue is doing is we're basically using limited grant dollars. Instead of putting grant dollars directly into the transition, we're using limited grant dollars to develop pipeline. And what we can do is, for probably every grant dollar we use for project development, we can activate $10 to $15 of private capital to actually finance the transition process. So there's a nice scalability effect out there also for funders, because instead of financing transition, they are financing pipeline, and then private sector capital can come in and basically execute the interventions. So after 3 years of planning, we started our first cohort of fisheries projects in Mexico. We have been identifying now 3 small-scale community fisheries in Mexico at the total development cost of roughly $1 million. We are working now for the next 2 years to bring $15 to $20 million of investment into these 3 coastal fisheries. Basically addressing the catch of 10,000 fishermen, creating not only the basis for more sustainable management, but also a much higher value and income for the fishermen and communities. So that's the first kind of pilot cohort we're undertaking, and yes, I'm excited to be here and learn how to fine-tune our mission and to generate higher impact. Thanks.